So thank you very much for this wonderful film. And Jón, please come forward. And you will tell us a little bit more about your project, about how you worked, and then afterwards we will have a discussion. So do you need something, or you are just speaking?
Yes, Sophia.
Please.
Thank you very much. And, yes. Oh.
Let's go in the middle.
Oh, yeah. Just put it here. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much. I thank you for a great festival. It's beautiful to be here, and it was very beautiful to see the film here in this place. So yes, I want to tell you a little bit about the process and as I talked about, as I named the presentation, how my grandfather set up his $1 million shot. I will tell you a little bit about that later on, but I would like to start with telling you a little bit about just where this comes from. So I was doing the MA program in Visual and Media Anthropology at Freie Universität, and decided to make this as my final project there. And what interested me just right from the beginning were, of course, the characters of my grandparents, but also this relationship my grandfather seemed to have with the preparation of his own death, the obsession with his own coffin, and the way he was talking about it and preparing for both the funeral and his mission to become 100 years old. So there was this event ahead, which was a kind of a starting point of the project. And but this was a very much of a learning curve for me, like the whole process. So it's the first feature film that I make, and it's the first time that I properly sat up with a camera to go around, and I did a lot of the things myself, and so yeah, I learned a lot throughout the whole process. And so a little bit of water. So when I mentioned this idea to first grandfather and then grandmother, my grandfather was very, very happy and very excited right away. Thought it was a genius idea, and just, like he had been waiting for this to come. Grandmother had a bit more doubts about the whole thing. She was like, I mean, what? Why? We are just two old people. There's nothing really here. But I mean, if you want to be around with the camera, that's okay. And so there was this. So there was, they're very different characteristics, very different approach to the camera. There was this very performative, playful attitude from my grandfather, while my grandmother was a little bit more hesitant and not so sure about it. So this was also like a process to kind of go through to find the right way, both with grandfather and grandmother. And first, I felt, also because I'm starting out and I'm coming there with a camera, and maybe in some ways I'm maybe trying to get something subtle, and then he burst out singing, and so I was maybe a little bit, in some ways at first, trying to, I don't know, minimize that while trying to get grandmother more, more in front of the camera. But I think throughout the process, this became more more natural, both his kind of playful attitude towards the camera, and then with grandmother, what I found was very important there was when we started to look into the poetry, look into her world of all these poems that she knew by heart. And this is where I really found her to kind of forget herself and kind of find herself in, let's say, her own kind of safe play world, so to speak. If grandfather was very, secure in singing and performing, for her, it was this place in the kitchen where we would sit down and have the camera, and she would forget herself in the poetry. And so first she would start to recite, and then after like a few more times, at one point she would even like start to sing one of the poems, and she would laugh afterwards and say like, what have you gotten me into? Like, yeah, I'm starting to sing for you. I've never done that. And I tried to ask her to do it again, because I felt like I had missed the beginning, because I just grabbed the moment. But she was such a rock star, she would not repeat. This is just one time only. And so that's just what ended up in the film, her singing that poem. And so what I would say is like, yeah, through this process of kind of getting to know my grandparents, of course, much more, and spending so much time with them, but also as a filmmaker, as an anthropological filmmaker, all of us kind of, I mean, they getting used to the camera and getting used to, what I am doing. There was created this, I would say, kind of a playful atmosphere that the further we got into the project, it became like more, let's say, fluid and natural. And so what I wanted to mention in that way is that how they kind of chose certain things that they wanted to portray or that they wanted to do. And so in that regards, I would say, for example, for quite some time, I was trying to get my grandmother in the kitchen. She had been, my grandfather was a lighthouse keeper, and she was working at home. They had 6 children. She had been taking care of the kitchen, taking care of the children all her life. And I wanted somehow to, get her, like, while she was cooking or when she was like doing some of these activities. But she really like soon told me that she didn't really want to be portrayed as a woman in the kitchen. That was not what she wanted. That was not the life she chose. She was a book gorger, as she described. When they were at the lighthouse, the books saved her. She read books, and the same books she read again and again. After she finished the shelf, she would just go through them, again. And so, yeah, so that was like kind of finding how did she want to shine or speak or be in front of the camera. And this was, again, yeah, kind of how we kind of got to the poetry and how this started to play this role. And in the same way, with grandfather singing, which I was a little bit like, at first worried that, oh, he's singing all the time, I can't like just have have these songs everywhere. But then again, because of course when you go through the process, when you start editing and you start to see these patterns and you start to, then of course he has to be singing all the time. He is singing all the time. That's part of him. He sings out on the street. He does, and so, yeah. So what I want to say in regards to this, what he called the $1 million shot, I think it also gives us an idea about like also how sometimes on point he was about what we were doing. So one of the things that I try to do is I wanted to get him on his walks. I wanted to catch him when he was taking some of his walks. And one day I called him and to check if he was going to be taking a walk. And he told me, "Nah, not so sure. I will do it today." So I took a drive around the neighborhood to catch some stills. And but then I see an old guy there, and I'm like, "Oh, is this grandfather?" And it was. So he had gotten out to take a walk, and so I kind of ran out of the car to try to catch some of this. But so in a hurry, I set up the camera. I didn't have like sound equipment ready or anything. And then he sits on this bench, and after a while, he just starts to kind of lie down there, and I was just really like fascinated, like what's going on? Why are you lying there? And he was like just kind of singing or saying some things and just a little bit like that. So I kind of walked past a little bit further, set up the camera on this kind of very still tripod frame. And then, suddenly a few seconds later, the cat enters the scene, and I just realized that the best thing I could do was just not to touch anything and just let it go. And then for over 2 minutes they kind of play, etc. And afterwards, when there was like a little family gathering, and so we're talking about what's going on with the filmmaking, etc., etc. And then my grandfather is really like bragging about the awesome, beautiful $1 million shot that we got today of him and the cat. and so I had, in this process, I was a little bit like, oh my God, I'm not sure, what am I getting? Am I getting it right? Da, da, da. But then, he would be like, he knew it before me a little bit. There was like, he had an eye, he had a feeling, and that this was also like such a, I don't know, good part of the process was to kind of feel this and learn from him, learn from them. And so that was the $1 million shot. So it became this kind of playful atmosphere, and so he had been singing here and there, etc. And then at one point I thought to myself, because he stops in these bus stops when he's taking his walks, we thought maybe to like, would you like to like sit here in this bus stop in front of the house and just kind of catch catch you sitting there, etc. And then he starts to do his like sailor practices, etc. And he's like doing all that. And then I kind of asked him like, oh, would you maybe take a song here? And then of course he loved that idea and really burst out singing and took to do quite some songs. But then of course he kind of took it further when this other person enters the frame and he welcomes that person into the film. So there was always this kind of conversation that it became like more and more of a kind of collaboration or conversation between us, and how it kind of grew slowly into this kind of core element. And then there's just one other thing I would like to say is that I mean, the elf theme was something that was not at all on anything that I thought this film would be about when I started. I was not thinking about elves, even in some ways a little bit hesitant to touch on it because it's can be a bit of a cliche about Iceland, the elves, but when grandfather starts to talk about the necessity of like changing his name to elf, and when grandmother gets a little bit like pretty angry about that, and they have this kind of arguments about this, and then especially after he gets more sick, he starts to tell me about the dreams about the elves, and sometimes even I wasn't even sure if he was describing them as like actually being there on his hospital room or not. It kind of I felt that it kind of forced me to really look into it, and it became this perfect metaphor, so to say, that he kind of provided for this film, about this journey towards the other world, towards the end of his life. And as you hear a little bit, when he was growing up, elves were all around. They were part of his childhood. They lived in the rocks, and that they were kind of appearing there nearing the end just became very fascinating and strong, and forced me to really like look further into this folklore that maybe I hadn't done enough, and was maybe a little bit blinded by the cliches that might be portrayed about. So that was really strong, and yeah, and yeah, just one little anecdote also is that I feel like when and after we got through the poetry with grandmother, this is also, I feel like she found the camera. She kind of found her space with the camera. She became more comfortable with the camera, and so I saw these kind of scenes where she's like, where they are fighting, and she is kind of having like a punchline saying that you could just put the books in the coffin, and then like looking at me and the camera. This is, in a way, I feel also part of it is that because we had found her space, she had kind of found her camera, and so yeah. But yeah, that's it, I think, for now.
Thank you very much for these insights in the process. Before perhaps I put forward some questions. Are there questions from the Janik, kannst du Mikrofon machen? Oder da? Ach ja.
Jón, first of all, thank you for bringing us into this world of your grandparents. It's a very special experience. And little fun fact, Jón and I work with the same dramaturgist and co-producer, Veronika Janatková, and yesterday we talked about it, how it worked for him, how it worked for me. So maybe can you, and this conference is about collaboration after all, can you expand? Can you share some of these experiences? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, we can, Veronika is a friend of mine, and then she came in as an associate producer, and yeah, first of all, I mean, of course, there's like so many people that come to such a project, and I was very, very lucky to have very good people that were willing to actually work for me for free. There was no budget. It was a school project, and so I'm very grateful for that. And Veronika came in, especially like at a later stage when I really felt that I had kind of finished the film. Like I finished the first version of the film 2018 when I graduated. Then I felt that I had a final edit there. Grandfather passed in March 2019. So then I realized I need to go, and this probably needs to be part of the film. And then I thought I could just add some at the funeral at the end. But then, of course, I realized I needed to go back into editing and restructure things, of course, etc. So this was quite a process. And then I felt I had the final edit, and I had a meeting with Veronica, and she was very harsh and was like giving me some pointers about things that she felt might be, needed to kind of take this further. And at this point, I was really tired, and I really felt that it is finished, but in the end, I'm very happy that I listened to her, that she kind of pushed it further. And so she came with points, for example, as she felt that maybe there was lacking a little bit of more context about the elves. So this is how this kind of elf radio thing came in. So to kind of try to put give people a little bit more context about, where a little bit what it's about. And so this was kind of a balance I wanted to try to find. I did not want to force feed people with too much on the nose information about exactly what this is, but still give you a little bit of a feeling. And so we discussed this, etc. And so I was thinking, so what can I put on the radio? And what I found was an old archival material, which is interviews with people of their own generation, speaking about elves in their farm or in their neighborhood or in the rocks around. And so this was kind of a layer of so it's not only my grandmother and my grandmother who are speaking about the elves, there's also these people from their generation giving little anecdotes throughout the film, which I felt was the right way to try to do what she wanted me to do in a way that somehow spoke truly to them situation and this kind of Icelandic folklore.
Is there another question?
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for this beautiful film. I think we're all very touched by it. And I felt it's enlightened me a lot about Iceland, not only about the personal story of your grandfather and his relation to death. We learned a lot about elves as well. I found that really beautiful. Thanks for that. One thing I would like to ask you is, how long did you actually film? How long was the period it took you to get all the footage? And did you have an ending in mind already? I mean, it was beautiful to conclude it with a funeral. It was a very round thing, but your grandfather could have lived on for another 10 years. So did you have anything in mind, or was it just like an open process?
Thank you. Very good question. Thank you. Yeah, so I started shooting in 2017. I went for a few days, and I was doing a kind of a small project for a course. So I was kind of thinking, okay, I will check out the possibilities. So I did around a week, I think, where I did some shooting in 2017. And then in 2018 is the time when I spent like 6 weeks during the kind of winter months, and then there was in the spring few weeks, and then of course there was the birthday in August. So in some ways, in the beginning, I thought maybe the birthday might be like a kind of an end point, and of course I couldn't think I didn't want to think like I'm waiting for death here, because again he could have been for 10 years more, etc. And of course I wanted that. So so the first idea was maybe around the birthday to finish there, but in the first final version, which is it did finish. I had a final shot. The closing shot was the one where he kind of knocks on the coffin, "This is my house," and he walks out. That's how it ended there. So the birthday and then that. But then, yeah, of course, when he passed away, this changed, and yeah, I had to kind of restructure a bit, etc. So then I did some shooting in the fall of 2018, and then of course at the funeral in 2019. So it's let's say yeah, 2 years period of shooting. Yeah.
Katharina?
Thank you for your film and for your talk. It was very interesting to know about all the negotiations and this big difference between grandfather and grandmother. I think they are very much like a lot of people that we encounter when we're filming. Some are really want really to be in camera, some are not. But I was wondering, how much did your relation with your grandparents build from filming them? Did you had like a very close relation before, or do you feel that the film itself allowed you to get closer to them, and how did it go?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I would probably say that in, let's say, in the few years before, like let's say 5, 6, 7 years time period, my relationship with them had kind of grown stronger. Especially me and my grandfather, like I had been kind of doing things like taking him to, when there is election day, we would go on a drive and he would go and visit the politicians and sing and stuff like that. And then I would like record some, I already started to kind of record some interviews, or like just to collect some stories from them like a few years back. So there was definitely a close connection, but it was more between me and my grandfather. But I would say definitely throughout the filmmaking, it grew stronger with grandmother, and it was, yeah, it was again, as I described, like through these kind of negotiations, finding kind of her place. Because again, she could also be quite irritated by his, oh, he's always singing, oh, he's always that, he's always that. So that was also challenging for me as a cameraman to not feel like, okay, if I'm focusing the camera so much here, this also annoys her. How do I find this balance? And so this was, so especially like the more time we had alone together, especially like my grandfather got sick and went to the elderly home, then there was like maybe more quiet and he wouldn't take over the space as much. And then we could have like these kind of longer talks, and she would be like going through the poetry, and this would be like a very precious time. And so that was like definitely through that process of trying to find these kind of spaces. Yeah.
I would like to add a question to that. What made this filmmaking with your grandparents? And how much did the grandparents, starting this process at a certain time, started to direct you?
Yes, exactly. This is kind of what I ask myself often. It's like, yeah, I mean, the way they, yeah, again, like this, it's this. What can I say? I come in with a certain set of ideas about how to try to do something that I've never done, and I learn about it in this conversation with them, who of course have not gone through this either. And so through these negotiations and conversations and I don't know, sometimes even being pointed at or directed towards certain things by them, they start to have some, kind of control of me, or where I should put the camera, what I should be focusing at. It was like one moment, for example, where my grandfather is very, very excited about this floating rock that you see a little bit in the film. And he's really excited about showing me the rock and really like pointing, you have to shoot this. This is really awesome. And what he actually said, it's funny, he said, because he knew that I was studying in Germany, and he said that the women in Germany will love this rock. And I'm like, I'm not sure, but I'll shoot it. And then it was a perfect rock to put there at this point, like floating there in the sink, and there's a magic in it. Like, why does it float? And so like there was these moments where I'm like, yeah, I don't know, I'm not so sure, but yeah, I'll do it. and then so definitely all these little moments of actually being directed by them. Yeah.
But also the question, what did the filmmaking with your grandparents and also the relation with them? Because it was at the very end of their long life together, and probably you initiated a reflective way.
Sorry, what? So
Because when you are living for, I don't know, 50, 70 years together, you know each other without saying anything. So you see a gesture and you know what's going on. But with the filmmaking, you started to make them to speak and think about themselves and their life and the end of their life. So what happened to them through the filmmaking process, also in their relationship?
In their relationship, yes. So, I mean, so there were the I mean, yeah. So I tried to. I mean, for example, I tried to ask grandfather in more detail about death in more like serious terms and how he was like preparing for it, and then there wasn't much that came, but it was more like through these gestures, through these kind of the way he was dealing with the coffin, etc. But there's also something that is not, and I decided very consciously not to make like a part of the film, or to, let's say, I didn't want to put the focus on that. But there's one element that grandfather was going through there, and both of them, of course, because of that. But grandfather was having a little bit of a kind of dementia episodes, especially late evenings. And this was a bit of a problem between him and grandmother. So this became very sensitive and hard, and especially me as a grandchild with the camera, etc., etc., etc. So this kind of was becoming a little bit more clearer as I was filming, and this is very much for me to like, okay, so what to do with this, how to think about this, etc. So yeah, so that was like one of the points where I felt maybe, especially like when it was more kind of coming up, because grandmother wouldn't really talk much about it, but then she would open up about it later on. And I think that was also a big part of how she started to feel more comfortable, because she was actually starting to tell us a little bit, okay, he is having these problems in evenings, etc., etc. So I would say, yeah, of course, you enter a home, and they have their relationship for 70 years, and I am a grandchild, and I have the camera, and then there are these very, deep personal things going on, and they're from a generation that really don't really speak about these things. So that was also very much something that to kind of go through, and then to think about what does it mean, and how do I deal with it in film. And I did not feel comfortable about like trying to put the focus really on that, or push grandmother into that situation of like speaking about it, etc. But this is again also why I felt the elf metaphor was so perfect and beautiful for this kind of journey towards the end, towards the other world, that it can resonate to this. There's something happening, there's little things here and there, and I mean, yeah, you could, for example, see it a little bit when he's like singing one of his songs, and it's like his favorite line, "Holy Hulda," the name of his wife, and he's forgotten the line. So there is, of course, a little bit like that happening. But then again, he's nearly 100 years old, and there's nothing more normal than to have a bit of dementia. So that was kind of, but it was hard to kind of navigate, go through, think about, and figure out, of course, and for them to have me around also, must have been hard too. Yeah, in that sense.
Thank you. There's still one question.
Thank you very much for sharing this story with us. It was really sentimental. And I would like to ask, when did you decide to decide the theme of the movie, actually? I mean, the film. Like, I mean, did you had any thoughts before filming it, or at what point you decided to name this film about the elf? And the other thing is, I felt like by doing this movie, by doing this film, I felt like your grandfather couldn't get the name Elf, but with this movie, actually, I felt like he succeeded in it. And did you had this thought in your mind, or?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll maybe just start with that last one. Yeah, he didn't manage to change the name. Grandmother was very angry, and she thought it was a ridiculous idea, and she didn't want him to do this. So it was not a good idea to take that further. But he told me at some point that, because I had been working as a journalist before, etc., he said, well, you're a journalist. I mean, maybe I don't need to change my name, but maybe if we announce it somewhere, if we make it public, that elf is with me, that, I am, some elf. And that's when I kind of felt, yeah, okay, that's okay. We are doing this. This is the contract, half elf. And that's at the time when I had gotten this idea about this title. And but no, as I was saying before, no, elves there was nothing like that when I started shooting. It was more a meditation and an idea about death and preparing for death and maybe celebrating life, 100 years. And then I really wanted things to come out of, let's say, I didn't want to have too much plan about exactly what this is about, but also allow myself, even though I know my grandparents, of course, very well, I also want to kind of know what are they going through at this point in time. And this, of course, that's why the film is not focused on their past, and we could, go through everything that they had done in the past, but it was very much centered at this time, and this was like one of my guiding principles. We are trying to understand what they are doing, what they are thinking, where they are at this point in life. And then, in the middle of this process where I'm a little bit lost and I don't know what the theme and where am I going with this, etc. But then I have this conversation with my assistant, like an editor who is a friend of mine who was helping me out, and I say something like this with him. I don't know, like grandfather, sometimes there's something about the way he is like behaving these days. He feels a little bit like some elf. He's like a half elf or something. And then he says like, that is a perfect title. And then, I don't know, from there, I kind of take it from there. And then also, kind of start to look and then I had already been kind of looking more into the kind of elf theme, and it was kind of had been popping up a bit here and there. Yeah.
I think we could talk for much longer with you, but unfortunately or fortunately, we have other speakers to come. And so I would like to thank you very much for your film, and now also for the talk about the film, and would close this session at the moment. I think downstairs there is now some coffee. So I invite you to have a coffee, and we will be here at 11:30 again. That's right.
Thank you.